Good morning. My name is Gene Burns. I was born and brought up in Watervliet. I was born here in 1929, and I always enjoyed Watervliet, and I was here for the first 35 years of my life, and I was always interested in the history of Watervliet. I'm looking at a book right now with some old photos in. The first is showing the old Roy woolen mills. James Roy was a neighbor of mine 2 doors away many years ago, but I didn't know him personally. They claimed that they were one of the first in America to use the Scotch-Irish immigrants to make their products. Then below that is a scene in the Shaker meeting room. Shakers, of course, started in Watervliet, the town of Watervliet, many years ago. They're all gone now, and there's just a few of them left, I understand, in Maine. Here's a shot of the first church in Watervliet, which was in the Port Schuyler area. And then they're showing the infamous side cut of the canal, where they claim they'd find a body floating in the canal every week or every other week. And there was also 42 grills within a 5-block area, so they had plenty to drink when they had to back up. They couldn't get through the side cut as fast as they wanted to, so they had to do something, so they'd eat and drink, I guess. Here's a shot of the Schuyler house, which unfortunately the kids burned down, I think, in 1964. It was the first home built in what is now Watervliet. It was there for many years, and then they turned it into a nursing home. And finally the vandals were hanging around it and started a fire one day and burned it down. Here's a nice shot of the first 16-inch cannon that was ever made in the United States, cast in the Watervliet Arsenal, I think about 1895. Here's a nice shot of the toll house that was in Port Schuyler. I believe it was pretty close to where Lou's Diner was. Most of us would remember Lou's Diner. It's now a video store, and of course you had to pay a few cents to go from Watervliet to Manans and on to Albany. Here's a nice shot of the Manili Bell Foundry, which started in 1826. They were the first bell founder in America to cast a chime, which is at least 5 bells or more. They had to be attuned together. It was a hard job, but Manili was the first foundry in America to learn how to tune their bells. They also made the first carillon in America in 1929. That had to be a set of at least 23 bells. There was many carillons all over Europe, but they wouldn't tell you how to cast them because it was a trade secret. So it took Manili until 1929 to learn how to do it. They only made 5 carillons in their day before they closed up in 1950. And here is a shot of the old railroad station. Of course, most of those were torn down in the 40s and 50s. Watervliet had one that was similar to all the other areas, and I remember as a kid hundreds of people getting off the trains at this station in, maybe the 40s, maybe early 50s. The buses in those days were 20 cents from Watervliet to Albany. The train was 17 cents. So people would take the train to save 3 cents, which sounds kind of ridiculous today. And here is a shot of an old trolley car. It says Manans Cemetery, West Troy. These trolleys were built in Watervliet at the Jones's Car Works in Port Schuyler. They were in business for a long time. They made a lot of trolley cars. They shipped them as far as New Zealand, from what I've heard of. And they claim that they've got a personal letter written by Abraham Lincoln when he was president, writing to the Jones Company to build them a special caisson to carry some guns in the Civil War. It's hard to believe today that the president during the Civil War would write a personal letter to a caisson manufacturer, but evidently it's true. I've seen a copy of the letter. And Jones's, I'm not sure, went out of business, but they made trolley cars that they used up until 1949 that I know of. They called them the football fleet. The Yale College used their trolleys, in what they called the football fleet in 1949. And here's a nice shot of St. Patrick's Church in 19th Street in Watervliet, one of the biggest in the area. Evidently the priest at the time wanted everything the biggest, the stations, the size of the church, and he also wanted the largest bell. So Meneely's told him that the larger the bell doesn't mean you're going to hear it that much further, but he insisted on a large bell, so they cast a bell that was 7,250 pounds. They got it up into the tower. They swung it once and the tower shook, so they realized it was too big to ring. So from then on they just put a toller on the outside of the bell and pulled the rope and tolled the bell while it was stationary. Here's a nice shot of the the Tilley Ladder Foundry, or factory, in Port Schuyler. Been in business for many, many years. They ship them all over the country as far as I know. Here's a nice shot of the McIntyre Hose Company, 2nd Avenue and 5th Street. I don't remember that operating, but we had 4 or 5 of them around Watervliet when I was young. One of them is still uptown. It says West Troy on it. And here's a nice photo of the Reformed Dutch Church, which was at 1st Avenue and 15th Street. The building is still standing. I believe it was built in about 1839. The tower had been blown down twice, so they finally realized they better not build another tower, so they just capped off the top, and the first 2 bells were demolished, so the 3rd bell is cast in 1900. This was Mr. Meneely's church, so he would bring customers over. He was just across the street with his foundry, so he'd bring them over if they wanted to hear a bell, and he'd toll it a few times for them. And here's a nice shot of the Watervliet Civic Center, which was actually the Watervliet High School at one time. In fact, my sister Betty was in the last class out of this school in 1937. Then they let it stay idle during the war. Then they turned it into a civic center for the children. Here's the nice shot of the First Baptist Church at 3rd Avenue and 16th Street. Sorry to say that caught on fire, burnt down in the, I think, 40s. I'm not positive, but I think it was in the 40s. That was completely demolished. And here's a nice shot of what they call the Collins House at Broadway and 16th Street. Years later it became the Central Market, which was a predecessor of the Price Chopper chain. They claim that many a deal was made over lumber and coal and whatever else they did in Watervliet in those days at the Collins House while they were sipping their coffee. And here's a nice shot of the public school number 3, which was at 14th Street and 4th Avenue. Before it was School 3, it was the original high school for Watervliet until they moved down to where the Civic Center is now. And this building was demolished in 2001, I believe. Here's a shot of the Watervliet Arsenal, the big gun factory. I worked in the Arsenal in the early 50s, and it was quite an experience. I worked on the first atomic cannon ever made in the world. In fact, we were working 7 days a week on it to get it done, and thank God they've never used it in war, but they spent billions on it, making it. That was in 1953, I believe. Here's a nice shot of the old Freihofer's horse and wagon, which we all look forward to when we heard them clapping up and down on the street. We always knew that the donuts and the cakes were coming. In fact, I knew one fellow, it wasn't in Watervliet, it was in Cohoes. His customer on the end of the street had a parrot, and when this gentleman turned onto the street with his horse, and his horse would be clip-clopping along on the bricks, the parrot would hear it and say, "Here comes Freihofer's," which I didn't think a parrot could even say. Here's a nice shot of a restaurant that was at Broadway and 16th Street. It was Baker's Restaurant, and after that it was used by the post office during the Christmas rush for their parcels. And nobody was supposed to know it, but everybody did, that there was a horse room above this restaurant. People were coming in and out all day, and Joe Rainey, I believe, was the owner of it, and he used to give all us kids a new dollar bill at Christmas time. There'd be hundreds of us lined up at Broadway and 16th, and one of his men would give us all the dollar, and I don't ever remember a kid trying to sneak in line the second time. Maybe they did, but I don't remember it. We all got our dollar, and that was a lot of money in those days. We would like anybody that's looking at this tape, if anybody has any photos of old Watervliet, you can bring them in to City Hall or here at the Housing Authority. They copy it while you wait. You don't have to worry about losing it or misplacing it. They'll take a copy of it. They don't injure your picture at all and give it right back to you within probably 5 or 10 minutes. So if you have any of those old ones, please bring them in and we'll copy them. And thank you for watching. I hope you learned a little bit more about Watervliet. And please bring those photos in if you have any. We'd love to copy them and keep them for posterity. And thank you again.